Kevin Durant leads the Suns to a win over the Cavaliers without Donovan Mitchell. The Nuggets storm back yet again versus a team under 500 to get a close win. Are they slipping a little bit? Trace Jackson-Davis has a monster moment versus the Spurs. The Mavericks take care of business versus the Bulls. And defense might just be back in the NBA. All this and more on Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NBA, your daily source for all things NBA from the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us every day and being an everydayers, hanging out with us Monday through Friday with all sorts of great shows and hosts for you all throughout the week, covering everything in the association. Today's show is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them all out today at nissanusa.com. My name is Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network and co-host of Locked On Nuggets. I'm joined by David Ramil. He's co-host of Locked On Heat. And we're going to break down everything. On today's show, we'll talk about Kevin Durant's impressive 37-point performance versus the Cleveland Cavaliers in a win for the Suns. They've now won. 3 and 4. If you go back, they've actually won a little bit more than that. We'll talk about if the Suns actually have a chance to make a real run at the title. In the second segment, a lot of talk about the officiating changes and how fewer fouls are being called. Do we like the fact that defense is back in the NBA? And will this continue to hold? And in the last segment, we got a lot of injury news to get to about Saddiq Bey, Alperen Sengun. We'll touch on OG Anunoby's return and a NBA champion hangs him up. We'll do all that and more on today's show. David, we'll start with the Phoenix Suns, who got a pretty good win tonight versus Cleveland. Cavs still without Donovan Mitchell, nursing that knee soreness that he's had with a bone bruise. So he's not, they thought he might be able to go, wasn't able to. Evan Mobley also out. But the Cavs got Darius Garland with 30 points in this one on 10 of 17 shooting, along with 5 boards. Jared Allen chipped in 15. They got 17 points, 11 assists from Karis LeVert. I'm talking about a lot about the Cavs, the team that lost the game, but the Cavs actually played really well in this one.
Yeah.
Had a lot of chances to win, but a third quarter run out of the half, really, they got the Suns in front, and the Suns were able to kind of hold them off. They were down big early, stormed back, took the lead, and just kind of held off the Cavaliers at the end. Kevin Durant goes 14 of 26, so not great efficiency overall. Like he actually, that's a better number than he was at one point. Like that's 54% from the field. That's pretty good. But at one point he was like 5 of 11 or something, or no, 5 of 13, and was like struggling a little bit when I saw him. And then like he just started rattling off points, just bombing, just shot after shot after shot. 37 points, 8 boards, 6 assists, 1 steal for the Slim Reaper, and a plus 13 in this one. Bradley Beal gives them 24, and Devin Booker gives them 27 points, 6 boards, 7 assists, as the Phoenix Suns with Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal and Devin Booker are able to get themselves now to 15-9 on the season at 63% winning percentage when the 3 of those guys actually are able to play together. I have a lot of thoughts on KD from this one, but kind of what were your thoughts on what you saw from the Suns?
Well, I don't take it all that seriously. I know it's an important game to win on the road, and obviously you're fighting in the Western Conference standings and everything else, but considering you're going up against a team without 3 starters and Mobley and Strus and Mitchell, and these are games that you're supposed to win. And, I think it speaks to what weaknesses the Suns do have in terms of their defense, their lack of depth. Their bench wasn't particularly strong tonight, but you get the big 3 and they contribute as much as they did, and to have them out there is a positive sign for the team. So it's a good win, but it's not something that I don't think the Suns and Suns fans can particularly hang their hat on that. And you can't go around saying, well, we beat, a surging Cavs team, considering it's not really the Cavs team. So, a solid overall performance, but I think the bigger story, and then you hinted at it, it was Kevin Durant. When he is dialed up the way he was, I think of it as he's just such a gifted scorer, and he looks so effortlessly. And I think, he's so underappreciated. We've talked about his legacy and everything else like that. We don't need to get into that kind of depth, but just when Kevin Durant looks the way he did tonight, it's just fascinating to see at his age, at this point in his career, still being such a productive and incredible player.
So this season, Giannis Antetokounmpo is having an amazing season. Okay, he's shooting 74.5% at the rim. Kevin Durant's shooting better at the rim. Kevin Durant is shooting 75.5% at the rim. How about this? That Joel Embiid, an amazing mid-range shooter, just absolutely incredible, 49.7%, or like in that range. Kevin Durant, 50.7%. He's shooting better from there. 3-point. How about this? Like, you go up and down, and all of these stats are like, oh yeah, KD shooting, but and it's every spot on the floor. Like, he's absolutely incredible. So KD this season is 76% at the rim, 51% from mid-range, which is ridiculous, by the way, on his volume. And 43% from 3-point range. I have said this. I still kind of feel this way. He's not going to finish. Like he said the other day, and we talked about like the idea of whether or not he belongs on the greatest of all time list that he said he was on. But I will just say, like, when I watch him play, I'm just like, that's an amazing player. Like, he is just so phenomenal individually in terms of his skill, his ability to hit shots. The overall play. There was a lot of sequences he made on defense tonight. He's a two-way player. He's underrated in that aspect. Kevin Durant really is something special. And at age 35, he's still putting up these kind of performances. I get I get the idea of like, well, look, it's the Cavs without two of their big four. And I get that. They have now knocked off the Nuggets and gotten a couple of wins. They've won 3 of 4. They're starting to surge like a little bit. I still struggle with what their identity is. But I do think like they're an interesting team of, can they find something between now and next month for them to be able to say like, this is who we are beyond just like mid-range jumpers go burr. Like, they need something else to be their identity, but there's so much talent that you got to figure out a way to unlock it.
Yeah, I don't think that's likely. I think you can kind of, if you're looking for their identity, it's the big three, and that's basically all it is. Like, I keep thinking about these super teams and their formation and everything else like that. And I know that era is a lot of people kind of point to it and say that it's kind of dead, right? But you have these incredible 3 all-stars there. And I think back to, say the Miami Heat big three and what separated them, if those shots weren't falling, and they're completely different styles of play, obviously, but they had the incredible defense. They had that tenacity. They could turn it on and flip that switch. I don't know that Phoenix can do it, but they can outscore anybody. And yes, maybe that's over reliant on their offense when their defense is not as great. And I mean, it's going to be porous, but I think that's still a path to winning is, we can still outscore teams. I'm not sure if that's going to guarantee, it can't guarantee them a title. I don't think they're the favorites, but I still like their chances in the playoffs. It just can depend on them catching fire at the right moment. And then all of a sudden being able to beat a team 4 out of 7 times. That's not great. And I don't know that you can look at them and say they're a shoo-in as a contender. Currently, 6th in the Western Conference? Not great, but it's still a good foundation when you have those 3 players. Like, that's enough to get you in the window. And that's really all you need in the playoffs, especially when you have a player like Kevin Durant. So I still think of them. I've been pretty consistent in saying that they're a very good team, that they're going to be fine, even when they were going through a lot of problems. And again, lacking an identity, but I think they're still good enough to win at a high level.
Up next, we'll catch up on some of the other games around the association. Plus, defense might actually be back in the NBA. What do we think about that? And do we prefer that? And will it hold? We'll talk about that. Plus, a little later on, we'll hit you up with all the latest injury news around the association. We'll just talk about that and more when we return here on Locked On NBA. Today's show is brought to you by BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off of our chest, big or small. Certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased on your life. So today, I want to say how I really feel about something. You might even be thinking about the same thing this week. I've been thinking a lot about the respect that we have for one another. I was in a press conference, and a player decided to be on his phone the entire time. And I'm not I'll talk about it here during this conversation about BetterHelp, but I'm not going to make a big deal. Why? Because no one cares about what the media thinks, and that's fine. That's okay. But I am kind of thinking about the respect that you have to give everyone around you. I once asked a coach if he felt respect was given or earned. Those two things I think are really interesting for how you approach life. I think it's difficult when you have conflicts between those types of people, because one is a subjective determination of whether or not you are deserving of it. And the other is a baseline that you provide all the people in your life. And you kind of need to decide what kind of person you are. Do you want people around you that are going to ask of the best of you so that you earn that respect? Or are you going to be around people that always want to create that kind of environment. And there's not a right or wrong answer to that question. It's just kind of an interesting kind of way to look at what's going on. So that's been rattling around my brain this week. Also, my wife's out of town, so I have too much time to think to myself. So I got a lot of stuff going on up here. Therapy can be different for everyone. Most of us have bigger problems than whatever that was that I talked about, or our favorite sports team. And it's important to get things off your chest every once in a while. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedonnba to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba. We'll be right back on Locked On NBA. Back here on Locked On NBA, thanks for joining us. Matt Moore alongside David Ramil. Appreciate you guys being with us here on Tuesday. Let's talk about some of the other games around the association quickly, David. So the Dallas Mavericks just jumped all over the Bulls in the first quarter. Like they just jumped all over them. It was like 40-16 in the blink of an eye. Mavericks ended up getting the win 127-92 in a laugher. The most interesting thing from this one, like, hey, guess what? Luka had another phenomenal game and another triple-double, 27 and 12 and 14 in 33 minutes of play. He was a plus 34. That seems good. But what was interesting to me actually within this one was Daniel Gafford had 20 on 9 of 9 shooting. Derek Lively had 22 on 11 of 12. And like, this is like a really key thing I think people need to understand. For playoff purposes, the Mavericks are going to be able to spam Luka Doncic pick and roll with a capable roll man more than they ever have before. And that's going to make, I think, a big difference in what their playoff run looks like. It's going to be tough if they have to get out of the play-in tournament. It's going to be tough if they're facing a really good team, but it is notable that the Mavericks have at least done the good part of putting capable rim runners around Luka Doncic.
Yeah, I love that point. The Heat just played Dallas, and they were pretty good. And that twin towers of Gafford and Derek Lively was a big reason why they were able to beat Miami to start off the current 3-game win streak. You know, they were just overpowering. They kept Bam Adebayo out of the paint. They packed the paint. They made things difficult for him and Jimmy. And I think they could do that against any playoff opponent. Like we talk about the Lakers and their size and the kind of mismatches that provides. But I think, you know, a little different overall, obviously, but to have those two rim protectors and the best centers that Luka's played with throughout his career, you know, knock on Dwight Powell. But, you know, I you know, they're a dangerous offensive weapon, and you can't stop Luka. Obviously, he's going to have his big moments. Kyrie's as, you know, productive as ever. They are a much more multifaceted team that they have been in the past. And, you know, they're still dealing with overall inconsistency, and they had injury issues and things of that sort. But I like their chances. I don't know. Where do you rank them in terms of contention status? Like, are they're a playoff team, obviously, although that's still in doubt, I guess, with the play-in tournament. But let's say in theory they're going to make the playoffs. Can they beat the upper echelon teams in the Western Conference?
I think they can make a conference finals.
Yes.
Again, the problem is I think they can make a conference finals, but it's going to be like the year that they made it, where it was like, hey, the Mavs made a conference finals.
Yeah.
And then
no, that's not good enough. That's not good enough anymore.
Well, not only there's a difference in making the conference finals as like you are a serious threat, and there's a difference in making the conference finals as in like the other teams fell apart or had key injuries or major problems. And like, to be quite honest, we saw that last year in the Western Conference Finals. Like, you can make these runs. I think they're live versus the Wolves for a number of reasons. I think they're live versus the Thunder for a number of reasons. I think they're going to be a tough out. They can beat those teams. Do I think they can beat Denver 4 out of 7 times? No, I do not. Like, do I think they can beat the Clippers 4 out of 7 times? Probably not. So, you know, they can make a run.
I think that's possible. The Clippers, yes, that's what I'll leave it at. I think they could beat the Clippers, but I see your points about OKC, and I see your point obviously about Denver. Like, that's still the favorite in the Western Conference. Can they beat the Lakers? Let's say if it comes out to it in a play-in tournament.
Yeah, and it's not just that. It's like it needs to feel like a real thing. It needs to feel more than just like the other team failed. It needs to feel like, oh, you have a gear, like you have a level you can get to that's higher. And I don't know that I've seen that from Dallas for me to reel right now. Maybe it's something you don't see until you get the playoffs. They might find that, but that to me is the question here. Warriors get the win over the San Antonio Spurs. Revenge for the Spurs getting the win the other night. Victor Wembanyama, 27 points, 14 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 steal, 2 blocks. The story in this one was actually Trace Jackson Davis, who had an absolute poster. He had a massive block and then a poster on the other end on Victor Wembanyama. You need to check it out. It's an absolutely insane dunk. It's absolutely incredible. Brandon Pajemski gave them really good minutes in this one. 14 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists. Chris Paul doing the point guard thing, 19, 9, and 8 for CP. Kuminga gave him 22. This is a big win for the Warriors. They needed it without Steph Curry. They need every win they can get right now.
Yeah, that's basically it. Without Steph, you got to find a way to win, and to get those kind of production, that production for Paul and Kuminga. They're still a dangerous team, albeit inconsistently.
Charlotte and Detroit, may God have mercy on your souls if you watch that game. Raptors, Nuggets went down by 21, and then the second half stormed back. You're never going to believe this, but Nikola Jokic had a crazy stat line. 35 points, 17 rebounds, 12 assists, 6 steals, 2 blocks. So 8 stocks.
Underrated defensive player, according to Mike Malone.
Plus 13 in the box, plus minus. Jamal Murray added 26 points on 11 of 19 shooting and 12 assists. Murray's been really great at distributing the ball lately. Porter with 19. They just stormed back on a Raptors team that was shorthanded. Look, here's what I'll say. The Nuggets were up 39 on the Jazz, and in the second half, it got down to 15. The Raptors jumped out to a 21-point lead, and the Nuggets only won by 6. I'm not saying the Nuggets are vulnerable. I'm saying the Nuggets have hit a point in their schedule where their focus is not going to be there. So don't be surprised if Denver, I think Denver's going to drop some games here. It's one of the reasons why I continue to believe that the Thunder are going to finish with the 1 seed, and it's going to be very difficult to not give Shai Gilgeous-Alexander the MVP. I don't think he's going to win at this point because Joker's had so many games on national TV that have impressed folks. But boy, I think that the Nuggets are going to slow down just because I think there's no point in a lot of these games for them. And you're seeing kind of their effort wax and wane. They're able to flip a switch, but there is something Spursian about what the Nuggets are doing right now where it's they don't play well, and then they did, and then they won the game anyway.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of systemic, right? Do you buy Malone's comments about Jokic being an underrated defender? Because I happen to agree with it. Maybe he's just talking up a player for the public. But what do you think of Malone's statement about Jokic?
It's always tough just because of when you're talking about underrated, it's okay, who are we talking about that's doing the rating here? I think most smart basketball people are able to see Jokic has good hands and executes well at the level in pick and roll. But look, if he's not paying attention, he does this sometimes where he doesn't want to engage at the level and he plays drop. And Nikola Jokic is an absolutely horrible drop defender.
He got roasted by RJ Barrett late in this game. So I mean,
he's never been comfortable with it. He's not good, but he has extremely quick hands. He's extremely quick. He's not fast. He's quick. And his anticipation is great, and he's also strong as an ox. And the defensive rebounding, you're pointing out the smart stuff, and you're right. And he will do a lot of stuff like that. But also, the rebounding is something that I don't ever give him enough credit for. I don't give anyone enough credit for. I'm always kind of someone will grab the rebound. No, it's not true. Jokic is one of the most dominant rebounders we've ever seen. And the ending possessions like that, I think does matter for, figuring out how that is. On the other side, we'll talk a little bit about how NBA defense has kind of returned to the fold with some changes in officiating. Plus, we'll go around the NBA and catch you up on the latest injury news with Saddiq Bey, Alperen Sengun, and a former NBA champion has hung him up. We'll talk about that on the other side here on Locked on NBA. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drives and great escapes. The Rogue is my favorite car I've ever owned. I am about to get a 2024. It's amazing. Yes. Class exclusive Google built-in is your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store are built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen infotainment system. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect mid-size crossover for your next adventure. I take it on road trips. I take it into the mountains when I go hiking. I take it all around town to drop my kids off. It is quite literally, in my opinion, a perfect car. How about the 2024 Nissan Pathfinder? It's got room for up to 8 and expansive cargo capacity and advanced available 4x4 capability with 248 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds towing. When adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. We'll be right back on Locked on NBA. Back here on Locked On NBA. Thanks for joining us and appreciate you guys being with us tonight or today. If you're listening to us on Tuesday, we are available on YouTube as well. Go to youtube.com/LockedOnNBA. So, David, tonight in the association, I thought it was kind of interesting that the average total for points, the combined total, was 118 points. That is low. That is much lower than we've seen throughout the course of the season, but it continues a trend that we've seen recently since the All-Star break. Ethan Sherwood-Strauss had a piece about this on his Substack. I first saw it. Tom Haberstroh first kind of brought attention to this. The data is really fascinating in terms of what we're seeing with free throw rate. And here is the best way to kind of describe it. Bump fouls on drives outside of the paint are what we're seeing. So coaches have complained consistently that point of attack defense is the problem. You can't really play physical with anybody on the perimeter without getting a foul called on you. So you let them go, which means you then have to help, which means threes are open. And that's how we get these crazy scores. And that's how we get these 70-point games. And that's what opens up all this kind of stuff, is the lack of ability to contain on the perimeter. Since February 1st, there's been a real change, and the NBA is like, it's evident that officials are calling less. Free throw rate percentage is down pretty considerably since the All-Star break, and particularly since actually February 1st. That's why when you can kind of see this differential change of what we're kind of saying. Like, as an example, we're seeing basically it's down by about a percentage point in terms of the free throw rate on average. And if that sounds like not great, it actually is. Like, that's like a really big difference. It's a huge gap across all these games. My question for you is, with these more physical games and with these lesser crazy offensive scores, is this an improvement in what you're seeing from the game? Do you like it? And do you think the NBA can continue to hold this line against what is sure to be a barrage of complaints from the superstar players?
To answer the last part, no, I don't. I think, I don't think I've ever seen this kind of historically in terms of like these kinds of points of emphasis. Generally, when it comes to officiating, you always see that at the start of the season, right? Like when they make a change over the summer, it's much ballyhooed. There's a lot of talk about how that's going to change the game. You see it a lot in October, November. By December, the calls are waning, and then by the playoffs, they're gone altogether. So whatever edict came from Adam Silver's office to say, you know what, let's allow defense a little bit of opportunity so we can stop the whining and complaining, we'll make it happen. And then I think eventually you just get caught up in the moment. You see the physicality, and I think you're going to make the call. And I never had a problem with it before. I wasn't one to ever say, oh, defense is non-existent, because I know better, because I see the games and I know that they're playing defense at a high level. And maybe it's just, the players are better and there's more capable scoring around the league from every position than there ever has been, which is why the league's at its best point that it's ever been, this is coming from somebody who watched 90s basketball and the heyday of Michael Jordan, etc. So I still think the game is fine. And I think ultimately, while these changes are fine in the short term, I don't think they're going to continue through the long term. I think the tendencies of officiating are too well ingrained at this point for them to make these kind of wide sweeping changes.
I have two interesting notes for you.
Okay.
Since February 1st, which again, I've talked to some analytics folks, and they noticed that February 1st is when we started to see this change, even before the All-Star break. Since February 1st, the Miami Heat are 10-6. If you want to know something else that's kind of interesting, when the opponent of Miami has attempted 5 or more free throws than Miami. So when Miami has a 5 or more differential, the opponent has a 5 or more differential over Miami, so they shoot more free throws than the Heat do. Miami is 1-11.
Yes.
If you're wondering, like, well, aren't all teams bad when they have a free throw disparity? No, the answer is actually surprising. I was shocked about this. I was actually surprised about this. No, the answer is about 13 teams actually are 50% or better, even when they have a free throw differential of -5 or more, or less rather. So basically what you're saying is, like, this rule change helps Miami a lot. Like, they are one of the teams that's really benefited from it. Another one, this is going to surprise, is the Dallas Mavericks. And you go, wait, that doesn't make any sense. Like, Luka's a grifter of the highest order. Here's the key. The Mavs are still hyper efficient even when they don't get fouls. They're not dependent on fouls. The fouls are just an easy path, but they are just as good offensively. And notably, they're a high foul team because they don't have those perimeter defenders at the point of attack. And so being able to foul more has meant that their defensive efficiency has actually improved. So kind of an interesting set of notes there. Let's talk about some injury news. Saddiq Bey, tough news for the Hawks who continue to get a bad series of it's just one injury after another for Atlanta on top of a bad season. Saddiq Bey is going to miss the rest of the season. Was diagnosed out today, so he's going to miss the rest of the season. Alperen Sengun for the Rockets, very fortunate. He was diagnosed with a sprained ankle and a knee bruise. Nothing structural, no surgery. That's a huge relief for the Houston Rockets. Now, I don't think Sengun's probably going to play for the remainder of the season. I think they're not going to make the playoffs, and there's no reason to bring him back. But it is great news, I think, that Sengun is going to be okay for the Rockets.
Yeah, no, I think I agree there. It's a tough break for Houston overall. Just out of the play-in tournament field at this point, and close enough where if Sengun was healthy, they might be able to crack that top 10 team, but I don't think it's worth it to bring him back because you're playing for the opportunity to fight OKC, Denver, Minnesota, whichever of those three teams. That's not ideal, even if you're able to somehow again escape the play-in tournament. So for him, you just kind of wish for something, like he can recover at 100% because he's been such a bright spot. And I know maybe it's surprising for longtime listeners of this show and us in particular, because we haven't necessarily been favorable when it comes to discussing the Houston Rockets, but Sengun has been fantastic. He's been an incredible find, like his growth. I don't think he's being discussed nearly enough as a most improved player candidate. Like he's been really, really good. He's like a hub on offense. Would you call him so far? I know this is a term that you're fond of. Would you call him an engine on offense? Because he just makes so much of what Houston does effectively kind of runs through him. Is he at that point yet, or can he reach that point in his career?
I think he can reach that point. I think he's close to it now. He moved way closer to it this season. There's still a lot of stuff I think he needs to pick up, and there's stuff that's going to come naturally with his evolution. Next 3 years are going to be really pivotal. But you saw kind of what happened. The more they run stuff through him, the better. Now he slowed down, I think, latter half of the year, and teams got a little bit of a book on him, and that's going to be part of the key here. Is like you have to learn those the counter adjustments to the adjustments, and find ways to rise above. But all of that, I think, is to say that if you've got the ability, if you've got the mindset to do what he's already done, I think you're well on your way. By the way, torn ACL for Saddiq Bey, which really sucks. He was great this year. Benedict Mathurin,
restricted free agency too, I should say. I mean, we should say,
Benedict Mathurin, by the way, also out for the season due to a torn labrum in his shoulder. That's a big blow for the Pacers. That's going to really hurt them down the line. You're going to see more Jarris Walker, but Mathurin has been a phenomenal scorer and gives them a real boost. They're going to miss him in the playoffs when they try and pull off an upset. Raptors Chris Boucher has a partial MCL tear, and so his team is he's not expected to require surgery, but he's going to be out for a while. I wouldn't expect to see him back. Last bit of injury news. OG Anunoby might return tomorrow. A lot of excitement, kind of news reports kind of bubbling up that OG might return for the Knicks tomorrow. If the Knicks can get Jalen Brunson, OG Anunoby, and Mitchell Robinson, most especially, and I'm sorry that I didn't mention Julius Randle, but I kind of like it'd be good. He's good. He's really good. He's good. He has 2 All-NBA appearances. Like he's really good. But like they need Brunson. They need Brunson, Mitchell Robinson's defense, rebounding, and rim rolling, and rim protection, and OG Anunoby's defense and threes. Like that core pillar of those 3 guys, with like what Josh Hart is giving them on insane minutes, by the way, and all the wings that they have, the Knicks can make some noise in the postseason. Those to me are the 3 guys that they need back for the postseason.
I agree. I think Randall's still going to be a potential threat, and we've talked about it before. The playoffs will define him to such a huge degree. And it's kind of unfortunate, but what is it? Walt Frazier always says, regular seasons where you make your game or something like that. And the playoffs are where you make your name, something to that effect. I'm misquoting him completely, but it's unfortunate for Randall that he's regarded in that light. I think he's still going to be a factor, but I still think the Knicks are really dangerous. Like honestly, as somebody who covers the Heat, the other teams in the Eastern Conference are not as big a concern, and maybe you could call me ridiculous considering how good Milwaukee's been and what Cleveland's been able to accomplish, and of course Boston's historic regular season. But of all the teams in the Eastern Conference in the top 4, the Knicks are the ones that seem like the biggest threat to Miami. I'll be 100% honest with you. My feeling, because of their depth, because of their coaching, because of everything they've been able to put together. Brunson is a hell of a player and doesn't get nearly enough love around the NBA. I think people who know the game appreciate what he does, but outside of that, like, I don't know if it's just, I mean, even in New York, he's regarded well, but I think that needs to be a little bit more widespread. Like, he is one of my favorite players to watch. His determination, his incredible ability to get that shot off. He's shorter than I am, and he just is unstoppable, and he is a badass in every way. And I really like his game overall.
Lastly, Otto Porter Jr.
Yeah.
Released by the Jazz and has announced his retirement from the NBA after 11 seasons. I was shocked to find they'd been 11 seasons.
Yes.
Sign of me getting old, where I was like, he's played 11 seasons? Gosh, that's crazy, considering that means that, Jackson Gatlin is the same age as Otto Porter's NBA career. That's just wild. Sunday host of the podcast, Jackson Gatlin, to be, just have been alive for the entirety of Otto Porter's career. Otto had so much potential, and just the injuries never got there. And he kind of talked about that in his retirement announcement. Yeah. And it's a good example. In my opinion, this is a good example of how we treat injuries as a character flaw.
Yep.
And I try really hard not to do it, right? Like, I want guys to play, and I think it's important to play the games that you get paid for. And I think that that's all important. And you have to accept the risk of the injuries. But at the end of the day, like, no one, from Joel Embiid to Otto Porter to any of these guys, Anthony Davis, no one decides that. Like, you can do all of these things to try and make yourself healthy. Like, Otto put the work in. These guys put the work in. They have nutritionists, and they have physical trainers, and they have their own training staffs, and they have their own doctors. They have the best medical care that money can buy. And sometimes the body just does not cooperate. And it sucks, and it's a bummer, but it's really cool that Porter got to be a key contributor on the 2022 Warriors team. Like, those are really cool stories. He reminds me a little bit, this is an old reference, speaking of old, of Tim Thomas, who contributed to the Suns runs in the mid 2000s, who was really good. Like, he was kind of a cast off and just like kind of never really got together, but he had like a couple of really great runs with Phoenix. And so it's cool that he was able to get a title, but best wishes to Otto Porter on the end of his career, David.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add. That was well said. Injuries are terrible. I like that you pointed it out. Something I haven't even thought about, like that the way that people characterize players that succumb to injury, and even the news, like the responses on social media, are so heartless. Like, this is a player who's still a very young man in every way, and unable to do what has defined his life, and to be able to get to this point and never be able to turn it on, and everybody's like, oh, he's made his money. It's like, yeah, but that doesn't take away from the fact that he's built his identity around this, and he wanted to continue his career. It's through no fault of his, as you pointed out, that he cannot play the game at a higher level, and at the same time, he has to do what's best for him. It's like, what am I doing if I'm just wasting time and wasting another team's money, and I'm not going to be able to get back to the player I was? I have to be able to make a decision and cut free and move on with my life. So kudos to him for having that kind of courage. And at the same time, hopefully he'll be able to make the transition a lot easier than a lot of athletes have.
That's going to do it for Locked On NBA. My thanks to David Ramil for joining me tonight, as always. Tomorrow, you can catch John Corrales and Jake Madison. On Thursday, you've got Pat the Designer and Nick Angstadt. And on Fridays, Adam Mares and Wes Goldberg. Keep it here all week long on Locked On NBA. My thanks to everybody for joining us. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you guys again next time on Locked On NBA.